How many of you watched King of Queens when it was on during the late 90s? And one of my favorite characters, of course, was Arthur Spooner, played by the great vaudeville comedian, or at least got his start in vaudeville, Jerry Stiller. Anyway, there's an episode where Arthur is worried that he might be having cognitive issues after having been exposed to mold dust. It's actually called, that episode was called Golden Moldy. Anyway, he says, let's just put this to the test, to his friend Spence. I've always been able to debate any topic and tear down opposing arguments with pinpoint logic. We'll pick a topic and we'll see if I can hold my own. How about this? Should the United States normalize relations with Cuba? All right, Spence says. The Cold War's been over for 10 years. Cuba is no longer a threat. But instead it could be a valuable ally and trading partner, so it makes perfect sense to normalize relations with Cuba. You moron! What do you know about anything? You're a frightened little drone who can't even get a date. If you're so keen on normalizing something, why don't you start with your face? He then smiles and says, I've still got it. Funny as it is to see enacted in a sitcom or reenacted from a pulpit, this is a really good example of how many of us nowadays, no matter our political persuasion, treat those we disagree with by belittling and attacking their character. Liberals, or some who at least fancy themselves as liberals, are as quick to use these kind of ad hominem attacks against their opponents as anyone else. Although it's hard for me to consider them liberals if they don't respect the inherent worth and dignity of every person, since that is kind of the definition of what a liberal is. Yet the instinct to attack others, be they from other clans or tribes as in the past, or other lands and countries, or other religions and cultures, or other political parties or identity groups and so forth, has been with us throughout human history. Probably because it was an important survival strategy for our primitive ancestors, right? Sticking with what worked in the past was a lot less dangerous than venturing into new territory, new ways, or new relationships. This instinct is part of what biologists refer to as kin selection, a term coined by William Hamilton in 1963. It holds that individuals of any sexually reproducing species will behave altruistically toward kin in proportion to the number of genes they share. Parents and children and full brothers and sisters share 50% of their genes, and so will behave more altruistically toward each other than toward first cousins who share only 25%. The fewer genes we have in common with others, including more distant relatives, the less altruistic we are inclined to feel toward them, and even less toward those whom we have no direct relationship with at all. In the grand scheme of life, the survival of the information within us, our genetic code and our beliefs, the information in our heads, is all that matters. We are but its host, and have evolved to unconsciously want to protect that information with ferocity until we have outlived our usefulness in doing so. We are little different in this respect than the poor mayfly that has no mouth or anus because it exists only long enough to reproduce. Or the unfortunate spider I saw just this week that was consumed by her offspring the moment they hatched. In nature, it is information, not its host, that matters. And this explains why we are so ready to fight over our differences with others, especially our ideological differences, believing that we are defending the right way of life or some divinely ordained truth, when in reality we are driven by the parasitic nature of information that needs us to protect it long enough for it to be replicated and perhaps even ensure its own immortality by becoming dominant. As evolutionary psychologist Robert Wright says in his book, The Moral Animal, the closest thing to a generic Darwinian view of how moral codes arise, how our beliefs about what right and wrong is, how moral codes arise, is this: people tend to pass on the sorts of moral judgments that help their genes into the next generation. In other words, our ideas about right and wrong, no matter how sure we feel about them, unconsciously justify doing whatever we can to whomever we must to ensure that our way and our ideas are protected long enough to survive us. And this is why primitive religions, no matter how superstitious and absurd, have persisted to this day. From an evolutionary perspective, this is the selfish gene at work. The tendency of information to want to reproduce itself and dominate its particular pool, be it the gene pool or the meme pool. Like all creatures, our instinct, wired into our neurology, into our biology, into our emotions, is to survive. But this isn't for our benefit as mortal individuals that are not going to survive, ultimately. It is for the benefit of the potentially immortal information within us that lives on only by being passed along to new host before we die. It's not a conscious process, it's just part of our code that has evolved to optimize information's continuance. It's like a logic gate. If it's repeatable, right? A logic gate. If it's repeatable, then keep doing it. If it's new, then fear it. Great survival strategy, at least at one point in human history, and it has been written into our behavioral code, and it lasts to this day. This is also why we have evolved to care more about those who are most like us than those who aren't. Our concern for others emanates like ripples on the water. Our instinct is to care more for those akin to us, especially our own offspring, followed by our siblings, then our cousins, then our friends, then our tribes, until our concentric circle of relationship gets so far out that it means nothing to us, beyond our reach, our perception. And if we don't feel related to those beyond us, beyond our immediate awareness, those closest to us, if we don't feel related to them, or that we can relate to them, to their ways, their culture, their ideas, then we feel little obligation to care about them. We may feel threatened by them and find an excuse to justify neutralizing the threat, to use a military term that we've heard a bit this week. We tend to do this with ease because, unlike other mammals, humans have largely lost our instinct to recognize members of our own species as such. The ability, that is, to readily recognize the humanity of other humans. Okay, a lion will recognize a lion as such, even if it has never seen that particular lion before. But for us, according to social psychologist Erich Fromm, different language, customs, dress, and other criteria perceived by the mind rather than the instincts determine who is a co-species and who is not. And any group which is slightly different is not supposed to share the same humanity. And this explains racism, the false belief that there are different races of people. Right? We still use the word like it means something. And white supremacy, the idea that one of these races is superior to all others. You probably talked a little bit about that last Sunday with our guest, right? There are people who still believe that. And if we see others as being inhuman or subhuman, we feel justified in treating them however we must in order to protect our ways and our ideas from being overcome or simply diluted and made impure from exposure to outsiders. As with racism, this attitude explains the various prohibitions against mixing that have cropped up throughout human history. It's an attitude similar to the belief that we are defined more by our ethnicity or the nation we are from than by our common humanity. Right? We still refer to people by what country they're from rather than what planet they're from. I'm an earthling. How many times do we introduce ourselves as earthlings? Where we are from, our family, our culture are meaningful, but they do not make us any more or less human than those from different places, families, and cultures. Humans are, in many ways, like any other animal, driven by our survival instincts and the drive to reproduce. Yet we are also unique. We're unique in our ability to act with introspection and self-awareness, just as we are doing today by considering some of the psychological and biological and neurological explanations regarding our instincts and our behavior. What makes us different from other animals is that we often want to rise above our unconscious instincts. We want to take charge of our behaviors, and we want to treat people with care and respect. We want to do the right thing. The better angels of our nature have also been with us throughout human history, as evidenced by admonitions from every religion to treat others, especially outsiders, with kindness and respect. To name just a few, the Hebrew scriptures say, "The stranger living with you must be treated as your native born." The Christian scripture says, "Do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers." Sikhism says, "All are my friends now, there being no enemy or stranger." Hinduism says, "The divine twins create between us and the strangers a unity of hearts." And the Japanese of Furusaki says, "All the people of the world are equally brothers and sisters. There is no one who is an utter stranger." These are just a few examples again, and I think they reflect the sentiments once expressed by George H.W. Bush when he ran for president in 1988, calling for a kinder and gentler nation. Through volunteerism, what he referred to as 1,000 points of light, and by promoting what he called decency in public life. And by the looks of things today, Russia's war against Ukraine, Israel's decimation of Gaza, the United States government's hostility against the whole world, within or beyond the borders, Bush's vision is far from a dream come true. As I said, nowadays almost everyone, including liberals, once devoted to the inherent worth and dignity of every person, readily demonize anyone with whom they have differences. Today, I wonder if this might have something to do with an unrecognized flaw in Bush's vision to begin with. As pleasant as kindness and gentleness sound, it may surprise you to learn that they are rooted in the very sentiments that cause us to favor those more like ourselves while fearing and often abusing those who are different. Both of these terms, kinder and gentler, are essentially the same word. They come from the same Proto-Indo-European word, gen, meaning to give birth, to beget, to produce, to give or to bring forth life. The root of the word, they are the roots of the words like generate, genesis, and gene, and it is also the root of both kinder and gentler. And the root of kin, kinship, kindred. Etymologically speaking, kin and kind are the same word. Which helps us to understand why historically and instinctively we have tended to reserve most of our kindness for our kin. Because that's what it means. I am kind to my kind. Those genetically akin to us, as well as to those whom we might consider to have been born of the same cloth, as we say. Kindred spirits, referring to those with whom we share similar qualities, cultures, identities, ideas, religions, so forth. Interestingly, it is also the root of, guess what? King. The word king, which explains those who once felt that they were united by being part of one kingdom. Kin. One kind of people. And it's the root of kindle, not the reading device. Kindling our candles of care. It's a word like birth that means to bring forth, to ignite. And even the word engine shares that root, a machine that is brought to life. Engines, candles, infants are things that we bring forth, and in the process they become our kin, and thus deserve our kindness, our care, our gentleness. But if we don't feel this connection, then for far too many of us, they are not our kin. And this is why our societies fail to become kinder and gentler, because we behave as if our differences define who we are far more than our common humanity does. Those closest to us, genetically or ideologically, are our kin, our kindred spirits, our own kind, and therefore we reserve kindness for them. In this way, we feel good about ourselves, knowing that we are kind-hearted people, while often turning a blind eye to the abuses our kind are committing against those beyond the distant ripples of our concentric circles of relationships. Today, moreover, the bonds of nationalism are weakening around the world, including here in the U.S. Being an American doesn't have the same ring for many as it once did. We feel more bonded with those who share our political ideas than with those born upon the same parcel of land as ourselves. Our fellow Americans are no longer our fellows. Their different ideas, different ways, different politics make them too different for us to understand or accept. They feel threatening to us. They are not our kin, and therefore they do not deserve our kindness. The morons. It's not just political divisions. Many Americans, as with the citizens of other nations, feel more akin to those of their own identity groups and are poised to demonize any outsiders who dare question their assumptions and truth about reality. Empirical experience is subservient to their lived experience, or to anyone who suggests otherwise. They would say they need to be demonized and silenced into obscurity. And this makes sense considering we are living during the decline of the nation state due to the globalization of human relationships and human systems, unable to cling as easily to our national identities, we retreat into smaller relationships, right? Identity groups. Or as with Russia, Israel, and now the U.S., we attempt to reestablish firm national borders and boundaries by attacking perceived outsiders, giving us the false assurance that we are too powerful to be threatened by the new reality, by the uncharted territory, by the uncertainties before us. So the problem with President Bush's vision wasn't that it was too grandiose, but it was too small to succeed to begin with. No country, let alone the world, can become kinder and gentler unless it widens its circles of inclusion. Its concept, that is, of who our kin are, who our kind are. In the U.S., as in any nation, we cannot become kinder or gentler to one another until we stop demonizing our political opponents or those outside of our identity groups. And we can't develop a kinder and gentler world, ending all the horrific wars and other hostilities going on, until we see the people of every nation, the Gazans, the Ukrainians, the Iranians, the Cubans who are suffering right now for no reason, and the many immigrants and refugees already among us, as our kin, as our kind. And to accomplish this, we must acknowledge and truly feel what we already know is true, whether we want to admit it or not, that all people share a common humanity, that all people are our kin, and therefore they are deserving of our kindness and our gentleness. The famous Lakota medicine man Black Elk once shared such a vision. I was standing on the highest mountain of them all, and around about beneath me was the whole hoop of the world. And as he stood there looking at the world, like the first men on the moon, seeing everything all at once, Black Elk said, in the center, one mighty flowering tree sheltering all the children of one mother and one father. And I saw that it was holy. Holy, just like it sounds, means wholeness, oneness. And that's the perspective that we must embrace and foster if we truly want a kinder and gentler nation. Only it can't be the mere desire to make one nation great again. That's not how it works. It must be a desire to make the whole world great for the first time by accepting that all people are part of one human family. They are our kin, and they deserve our kindness. Thank you.